Service. Apex Bank of Camden, Benton County's best bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Operation 7570 on this Saturday morning. A beautiful Saturday morning, the last Saturday of the month of August. Then next week, we swing into September. And, of course, next weekend, the Bargain Highway. Of course, we had Kevin Stepp and Lori Matlock, our guest last week on 7570, talking about all the activities of the Bargain Highway. You'll be hearing much, much more about that as the week goes by. This week, we have announcements up here on WRJB. And, of course, the Benton County Camden Chamber of Commerce has much information concerning the Bargain Highway. But this morning, we welcome to our studios the lead writer for the Camden Chronicle. This is Angela Jones. She's been with the Chronicle a few years, and we're going to find out all about Angela, her background, how she became involved with the Chronicle, and what the Camden Chronicle is all about, the hometown newspaper in this day and age of social media, modern technology, things like that. But Angela, good morning to you, young lady.
Good morning, Flash. Thank you for having me today.
I want to thank you, first of all, for helping me with election results about three and a half weeks ago.
That was my pleasure. I'm glad we were able to get that information out to Camden and Benton County and all the voters who had been to the polls that day.
Been a busy week with the fair and everything down at the Chronicle?
It has been. Usually the fair week is about my busiest week of the year with so many activities going on at the fair that we try to cover or get information about. Fortunately, we have some really good partners through the UT Extension who cover things for us, some of the 4-H and those activities. Crystal Floyd and Heather Smith and some of that crew helped to get us some information about the 4-H stuff.
Yes. Outstanding individuals. Angela, before we get deep in our conversation this morning, give us some background about yourself. I mean, the background, how you become associated with the Chronicle, and how long you've lived here in Camden, Benton County.
Okay. Well, I'm originally from West Monroe, Louisiana, which came to fame a few years ago, about 10 years or so, with the show Duck Dynasty. Now, I can tell you honestly, I had never heard of those fellas, the Robertson family, until they had a show. So our West Monroe area in North Louisiana is bigger than people realize. But that is where I grew up and where I'm from. I went to college at LSU in Baton Rouge for 4 years in the late 80s. Our quarterback at that time was Tommy Hudson, who was a pretty good little quarterback. So I was there for 4 years. Then after that, I went to work at NASA in Houston, where I worked for 1 year because I did not love it. And then I asked my folks, can I move home and be a writer? And my mom put her head in her hands and shook her head, and my dad said, well, I'd love for you to move home for any reason. So that happened. I went home, wrote a bunch of bad poetry, and ended up with about 7 part-time jobs before I went back to school. So.
Okay. All right. LSU Bengal Tiger fan when it comes to football, basketball season?
Absolutely, right. More of a football follower than a basketball follower, but I do enjoy watching LSU football. I don't feel really confident about our season coming up, but we'll hope for the best. As I say to my friend, I have a good friend who's a big OU fan, a Sooners fan, and we have a little friendly rivalry that we go on. I say, if LSU can screw it up, they probably will.
Got that new coach coming in this year.
That's right, we do. I think we're going to miss Ed Ogeron. I think that was a mistake, but that's just my opinion. But we're going to give the new fella as good of a chance as he can, support our LSU Tigers regardless.
Well, as Coach Orgeron learned, you can be at the top of the mountain one night, and the next day, it's all downhill from there.
All right, or as Heidi Klum would say, you're out.
Yes, of course, many, many times. But anyway, great to have you in our midst up here in good old Camden, Tennessee. How long have you lived here now?
I've lived in Camden since the summer of 2003, so 19 years at this point.
And how long has your association then been with our local newspaper, the Chronicle?
I started working for the Chronicle about the beginning of October in 2015. So I've been there for almost 7 years.
Right at 7 years right now. What do you know about the local newspaper business that you didn't know 7 years ago?
Well, it's more complicated and less complicated than I would have guessed 7 years ago. I have to admit that I've never been a big newspaper reader. The only time I had ever read a newspaper consistently was when I was working the night shift back working on my master's degree. And I had noticed the Chronicle over the years here in Camden, that it had changed in size a little bit and that it had fewer pages than it used to and so forth. And the way that I happened to get a job at the Chronicle was I was good friends with Christy Halsey, who runs the Funky Banana. And Christy's good friend, Karen Weathers, was production manager at the paper at that time. And it came down to me that they needed a proofreader. And I was ending a job that I had been doing for that had brought me to Camden, and I'd wanted to stay in Camden at that time, so I took a job as a proofreader, and it all evolved from there.
Now, the Chronicle is part of an organization called Magic Valley Publishing, MVP, and the owners, the Richardsons, they have a lot of newspapers spread throughout in local towns.
Yes, they do. MVP holds a total of 17 publications, including papers such as the Waverly News Democrat, the Camden Chronicle, the Carroll County News Leader, Dresden Enterprise, Crockett County Times, Lake Banner, and a number of papers in the Shelby County area. Also, like the Buffalo River Review, and some papers just on the east side of the river over there.
Yeah.
But 17 publications total.
And ownership of WRJB. And,
that is true. And the Funky Banana.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
And
so
the API Press.
I forgot about API Press, which is the printing press over at Huntington.
Yes, it is.
Right now then. Would you happen to know, of course, even before the Richardsons took up ownership of the paper, would you happen to know the history of the Chronicle, how long it's been in town? Or the history, how many decades it goes back?
Ashamed to say that I don't actually know all of that. I know that the Chronicle is more than 100 years old. It's been published since, I believe, the late 1800s, and has had many owners over the years that it's been in publication there. And it came into the Richardson family, or the Hatley family, I believe, in the 80s, and they've gone with it from there. And certainly, for the past 20 years or so, it's been a Richardson product.
Yeah, of course, when I started taking a little interest in the newspaper back in the 60s, Bob and Rose Johnson and his family had ownership of the Camden Chronicle. I know many people remember those fine folks. Then at one point, the Chronicle was sold over to the Williams family with the Paris PI, and back with the Churchwells, and now into the Richardson family. So there is a very, very good history. But how big of a staff is at the Chronicle right now?
Well, on a daily basis, you might encounter up to 5 or 6 people there in the office. When COVID hit back in the spring of 2020, a number of our staff went to work from their homes, and some of them have never come back. So we have a couple of our graphic artists who work from home and have been able to do a great job with that, and it's been really productive for them, so they have just stayed there. But our total staff at the Chronicle is about, including the people who work more of the corporate MVP side of things, is about 10 people.
Yeah. So. Do you ever perhaps maybe exchange ideas with, mentioned the Waverly News Democrat and over Shirley and all the fine folks over at Carroll County? Do you all ever talk about exchanging ideas, or, maybe localizing a story that they have put in the Huntington paper, Waverly paper, that sort of thing?
Sure, we certainly do. In fact, to that end, we have just added a new position within MVP, and that's what we're calling our regional news desk. And we have Sabrina Bates, who had been the editor of the Dresden Enterprise, has taken on the job of being the news desk editor. She is also she's a great writer, and we're excited to have her in that position. And what we're trying to do there are any number of stories that are of relevance to most of West Tennessee, either state-level stories or even national-level stories of our representatives or politicians who do things for us, or things that are of interest or should be of interest to our readers. And so what we're doing with that is trying to have one person to handle those regional or state type of stories, rather than having multiple people at multiple papers doing the same story in a given week. But we also share content as it's relevant from county to county. Say Shirley Nanny, who's the editor of the Carroll County News Leader, might write a story about something that is of interest to our readers here in Benson County, and we might borrow that story in a given week. Or likewise with last year, for example, with the Waverly flood and the terrible flood that took place over there, some of our writers over at the News Democrat, we borrowed from some of their writing and some of their reporting about that tragedy and what happened that day, and had some coverage in our paper about that. So we kind of mix and mingle with our different writing and whatever's relevant for our readers. We're just trying to have a good paper for those who read it.
And there are a lot of ties, Humphreys County, Benton County, Carroll County, a lot of ties here along the rivers of the Tennessee River and backwards and forwards, a lot of relatives, and so, people here with kinfolks in Waverly and Huntington, they're interested in what's going on over there and vice versa.
I believe so. I do believe so. I mean, you have, like you said, different families with siblings who are spread out, or parents in one county, kids in another county. Those kinds of things certainly are common among our area. And also we have, our sports teams. One week they may play here, one week they may play in another county. So that's always interesting to follow what's happening there.
Now, we see the finished product. We look forward to the finished product of the Camden Chronicle Wednesday afternoons, Thursday when it gets out on the mail deliveries, things like that. Pick it up at a convenience store or wherever. But we look forward to the finished product. But what goes on behind the scenes in getting that weekly product ready for the consumer to read?
Right. Well, that starts with the writers and photographers and so forth putting together a lot of information on typically on a computer, some type of word processing program. That information then goes on to one of our layout people, our graphic artists, who use that information to put it into an Adobe product program called InDesign. Once they finish laying out the paper, putting all the stories where they're going to go and all the ads where they're going to go, then they save that out as a PDF file. That PDF file is emailed or put through Google Drive, an internet site you can access, for our staff over at the Associated Press API over in Huntington, which is, as you said, owned by MVP and staffed by MVP personnel. Then the press people go to work on it. They have another computer system that they open it up on, and they make these plates that are, I think, aluminum plates that ink goes on and information goes on, and those run through the press and through a process of water and electronics and ink that magically becomes print on a page. And once that happens, it spits out of the machine. We have a mailroom crew that puts in the inserts and puts on the address labels and all of that and gets it all organized. And then we have somebody picks it up in the morning to do delivery and gets it out to the community and out to the various post offices and then eventually on to the readers.
Now, API over at the printing press at Huntington, we don't want to confuse that with what we know as AP, Associated Press, the
Exactly.
Nationwide News Gathering Organization.
Right, it is two different things. So Associated Press Incorporated over there, that API, that is a printing press, not Associated Press, as you said.
Right. Now, have you always worked in the days down at the Chronicle with the technology and the computers to get the finished product ready to go,
Yes,
as opposed to the old days with the printing press, things like that?
When I started in 2015, we were already fully digital, fully working on the computers and generating the press sheets that way. But some of the folks who've been there longer, Vanessa Witt, Christy Halsey, of course Karen Weathers is retired now, but they could tell you about the days when they were actually doing layout not with the type per se, but of creating sheets by taking pictures of them. So they would lay out the sheets on a big broadsheets and then take a photo of that page, and that photo would be what was used then to create the press page.
Now, there comes a point before we see the finished product on Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning on delivery, there comes a point when you have to have a deadline. When is deadline?
Well, our deadline for our poorly observed deadline for content for the paper is supposed to be Monday afternoon at noon, but we usually extend that through most of the day Monday. Depends on what it may be for. So we do get a few late ads in. We try not to do that, but because they have to be created, time is taken to create that content to put in the paper. But we have to get our finished paper to the press by 6 p.m. on Tuesday.
You're getting close to deadline. You've got things ready to go. Then all at once, just an hour or two before deadline, what I call a breaking news story. Do you ever have to change at the last minute?
We certainly do. We have had those occasions where we've had to change at the last minute, and that we want to get out to our readers the most relevant, current information that we can. With the weekly newspaper, you don't often get an opportunity to have breaking news per se. you're serving more of a function of a review or summary of things that have happened in the last week. But when we do get that breaking story late on a Tuesday, we will take the time to hesitate and get that prepared and put that in the paper and rearrange as we have to. And sometimes we don't meet the 6 p.m. deadline when those kinds of things happens, but that's okay. We try to get the news out there for the folks.
And I know there's been times in the past, I think we've had, I'm trying to think. I think in times past, maybe it was back in May, Election Day was on a Tuesday, and that gets pretty close to deadline.
Right. Well, and on that day, we held the paper. That was our Republican primary back on a Tuesday in May. And we planned in advance, knowing that people would want to know the outcome of those elections as soon as possible, to hold the paper a little late that night, and maybe switch around with some other papers printing at the press that day so that we could get the election results into the paper and onto the press and out the next day on Wednesday.
Well, in your experiences with the Camden Chronicle for almost 7 years right now, what do people want to read about? What photographs do they want to see on a weekly basis?
Well, just based on my tracking of paper sales and so forth, it seems the number one kind of story that people like to read about is something that they don't know about already. Okay, so if there's been an arrest or an accident or a fire or something of that nature that they don't already know all the details about it, those are the kinds of stories that lead best in the paper in regard to sales. Now, people like to see a documentation of our daily life, of what we're doing here in Benton County, what kind of things are happening here with our social groups and our government and our schools and those kinds of things. And so those are the kinds of things people seem to want to read about in the paper.
And I think the kids playing football, the sports teams, of course, and they like to see photographs, I think, of children doing fun things with the schools, maybe with a STEM project, things like that, just like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had some really wonderful stories this past year, speaking of STEM, coming from Camden Elementary School and our friends over there who have alerted us to all that they're doing with their STEM program and with expanding their playground and things like that we've been able to report about. Of course, we've also, like I said, we have great news partners throughout the community. Our friends at Extension often are able to get us some really good articles and information about things that are happening through Extension, whether it be 4-H or agricultural programs or other kinds of programs for the community. We occasionally get some contributions from the Benton County Camden Chamber of Commerce. We'd love to have more. And we also have some good partners in the veterans community. Mike Lawler has been a really fantastic contributor, sending in articles about veterans or patriotic affairs that are of relevance to the community. While he's been in office, Brett Lashley has been extremely good to give us information about things that are going on with Benton County government. And I hope Mark Ward will continue that tradition when he comes into office. So there's a lot of different things that go into a community, and that's what is reflected in the newspaper.
And I would imagine this coming week, of course, it's actually, I think, on Thursday, the swearing in of new county officials. I know personnel will be up there covering that for the following week, but I guess for this week, reception yesterday for our friend Sherry Crossno-Beasley up at the courthouse, a trustee for 24 years. Quite a record of service to the folks of Benton County. She worked in the office several years before she became trustee, and I would imagine, that is the type of story people want to read about.
I hope so. We're going to definitely have a story in there about that. And congratulations to Ms. Beasley on her many years of service and her dedication and now her well-deserved opportunity to take a break.
Well, now that you've been with us 7 years going on 7 years down at the Chronicle, do you find people are maybe more receptive to you? You've got more contacts out there than on the beginning? Absolutely.
It's kind of funny in a way. I'm not a very public or flamboyant person, so I'm not out in the community a whole lot other than for the work that I do for the paper. And I had already been at the paper for 5 years when our former editor, Pamela Mirabella, moved on to better opportunities, and I had a number of people who welcomed me to the paper, and I would have to say, well, I've already worked there for 5 years, but thank you. But I have a number of contacts within our governmental system. I cover the county commission meetings and have been covering those pretty much from the start my start with the Chronicle, so I have a lot of good contacts there, and that body is very receptive to me being present and interacting with me in terms of getting the news out about what the county commission is doing. I also attend the Camden City Council meetings or Board of Aldermen meetings, and they're incredibly friendly and inclusive in allowing me to be a part of those meetings and to gather information from them. So I've just taken an approach of trying to be, very friendly and impartial with all of the stories that I cover or anybody that I interact with, and to make people feel comfortable that I'm someone who can be trusted, that if they tell me something's off the record, that I respect that and don't do an expose or something on something people weren't ready to have out in the public, which is not to say we wouldn't, if there were news that were essential to get out there, that even if somebody didn't like it, we would still do that. But in as far as it's not essential news at that time, I'm happy to respect somebody's point of view.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, time is rapidly getting away from us. Good conversation with Angela Jones this morning, but it's time to hear a message from our great friends, our sponsor, Apex Bank. A message right now. We'll be back with the second portion of Operation 7570.
Apex Bank of Camden, proudly serving the Benton County community since 1931. In recent years, through growth and expansion, we've taken that same local community spirit into other markets. Today, with over 20,000 customers across Tennessee, our business philosophy remains the same. Local people making local decisions, serving our friends and customers, and investing in the communities that we serve. Here for you yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Apex Bank of Camden, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Operation 7570 on this Saturday morning. Angela Jones of the Camden Chronicle is our guest this morning as we have a conversation about things in the local newspaper office down here and things like that, things she writes about, the people she comes in contact with, things like that. Angela, I know that sometimes you even have to be out on weekends, maybe on Sundays as a small-town newspaper reporter, lead writer, of course, but there's got to come a time you've got to get away. So what do you do to get away? What are your hobbies?
Well, I have a couple of hobbies that I enjoy, and one of those is I love pets. I have a number of dogs, although I'm down to only 2 dogs, which is the least dogs I've had in about 20 years. And another thing I enjoy doing a great deal is I love to travel with my family. And that would be primarily my mom and dad, who still live in West Monroe, Louisiana. My mom is 82 and dad's 83, but they still are getting out and around and are thrilled that the COVID issues have subdued somewhat, that we're able to travel again. Mom really missed that for a couple of years. But earlier this summer, I went on a cruise in Alaska with my mom, Gloria Jones, and I've got another trip planned coming up in October to go up to New York State to see some of the pretty fall foliage and so forth, and to make a little trip into New York City to see the Music Man. And that's also with mom and dad. So. And
Music Man, one of my favorite films of all time. I guess made, late 50s, early 60s when that first came out.
I believe so, right, with Shirley Jones and Robert Preston.
Yes, great movie.
Right, great movie. And we've got a revival, of course, on Broadway with Hugh Jackman and Sutton Foster, both of whom are such wonderful, wonderful performers. I know no slight to Hugh Jackman, but I'm more excited about seeing Sutton Foster. She's got a fantastic Broadway career, along with some great TV shows as well. But she seems to be able to perform and do anything. So I'm really excited to see her.
As you well know, we have a neighbor over in Henry County who's done very well on Broadway. A couple of Tonys. She's also been in television shows and also in movies. Cherry Jones over there.
That's right. She certainly has had her success on Broadway and in television and movies. And I don't know her myself. I know some who are good friends with her, but it's always exciting to see our local folks go off and do something. And I think sometimes we look at performers or people on the national level of performance or international level even, and tend to forget that they're just everyday people, like we all are. They have families and hometowns and so forth. Just like Cherry Jones is from Henry County up there.
Yeah, and of course Hal Holbrook, his association with Dixie Carter over at Carroll County and the Dixie Performing Arts Academic Center over there as well. Through the years, you'd see Hal on the streets, their home at McLemoresville. He just just a good old country boy.
That's right. That's right. So it's exciting to see performers out and about, and to see our hometown people, do well and be out on and like who is Tyler Warren, for example, right? Is been out on the international stage touring with Queen, and any number of other people who are out there doing their thing.
Well, with all your traveling to these great places that you've told us about and going to New York on the Broadway shows, did you ever think perhaps you might like to be a writer, a travel writer, or write about Broadway shows, things like that?
Well, I have thought about that, and I've had a couple of folks here locally say, we'd like to hear more about your travels and where you've been and what you've seen and that kind of thing. So that's something that we might possibly add in at some point. I've been very, very fortunate to make many trips with my family over the past 20 years, since about 2002. It's when I really started traveling a great deal, and have been to Mexico and Canada and all over the United States. And it's fun to talk about those places.
Indeed. Hey, I'd love to see those. I hope you're keeping, at least, and I'm sure you are, your own personal diary of all these many travels and adventures that you have.
We've been to so many different places and seen lots of wonderful things. I mean, from natural wonders like the Grand Canyon or Yosemite Valley, Lake Tahoe, to institutions like Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., and Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and just a variety of places like that. And of course, Mom and Dad have been coming here to see me in Benton County for 20 years, and we've made many trips to Memphis and Nashville and areas around us here. We went up one recent trip. We went up to see the Ark, have the Ark encounter up in Kentucky, and that was a really moving trip. So I'm just very fortunate that I've been able to get out and do those kind of things.
Well, very, very fortunate. And as you look back, as the years go by, those will be more and more precious memories as the years go away.
That's certainly true. Yes. With my parents of an age, and fortunately they're fairly healthy for their age, but their mobility is a little bit challenged now. So we're traveling now with scooters and stuff like that to ensure that we're able to get from point A to point B. And that adds a new twist to the travel. I'm sure many here have had those experiences too. But like my mom said, she said, I'm not ever going to give up. I'm going to keep trying. We're going to keep going. Yes, ma'am.
At the top of the program, Angela, you mentioned the fact that here on the horizon for the Chronicle and the other newspapers under the Magic Valley Publishing banner, of course, that there's going to be more young ladies going to be assigned to do more regional stories. That's something that we're interested in, something Weakley County's interested in, Carroll County, Humphreys County, wherever. So, as you well know, and you get a lot of information each and every week from PR representatives, public information officers of various state departments or other organizations. So do you have to just sort those out and say, hey, that's not relevant to us?
We certainly do. I mean, there are any number of press releases that come through the email or across your desk in a given week. And that's part of what your job is as a writer, as a copy editor, is to look through and try to decide what's relevant, what's of interest for our readers. But a couple of stories I know we have coming down the pike from our regional desk. In the coming week, we're going to have a new story about our new DA, Neil Thompson, who'll be taking office next Thursday. And there's a story about him that will appear in the story will appear in the Chronicle and in the newsletter, and it's been tailored to be appropriate to each audience in those two readership areas. Another story that we've got is about the kids count data that the state of children's welfare and things we should be concerned about in Tennessee, and how that's relevant to our county. I know Sabrina had spoken with a number of people at our Benton County Board of Education in regard to that, that report, to see how that's relevant and of interest for folks here in the county. A little later on, probably in October, we'll have an in-depth article about our two gubernatorial candidates, and that's relevant to all of us as we have to make that choice in November of who will be our next governor or be our returning governor, as it were. So in sorting through all the different information that comes across your desk, because there's certainly plenty of it, we just try to keep it relevant for our readers. If I read something and I think, well, that's interesting, or that's of interest to me as a person living here in Benton County, then I think, well, somebody else here in the county might be interested in that as well. And so some of that stuff may end up in our B section if it's not, just super relevant for our local community. But as a person who likes to travel, as we get things that say here's an activity or an event happening in a destination within an hour or so of Benton County, sometimes I'll include that kind of stuff as well, like here's some options of things to do.
Every now and then as well, in the Chronicle and the sister newspapers, there will be what I call special sections. I know in the past couple of weeks, a special section on the football season, volleyball. We also, from time to time, maybe a bridal section or whatever the occasion may be. How important are those to our regular following, our readers?
Well, we hope they're important to our readers. We like to spotlight those groups and teams and different events that are special to Benton County. We know Benton County really enjoys following our sports teams, so those are some of the ones that we really enjoy putting together, such as the football section, which we just had out, and we had a volleyball section out this week. Coming up in October, we usually do our breast cancer awareness section for that month. Then, of course, we do our special section for Christmas time, which is, I think, one of the favorites for everyone, which is reading all the different letters that the children have written to Santa about what they would like for Christmas. And there's some fantastic stuff in that. I'll never forget my first season with the Chronicle back in December of 2015, and I was helping to type up our Santa letters that Santa forwarded to us to put in the paper. And one child asked for, I would like a bicycle and a taco. And I thought, well, that covers it. That's just really struck me as random. But I enjoy reading that. Yeah. We like to put that special section out, get the extra information out there for our community and for our readers. And we're always open to doing something different. If somebody has an idea or a particular theme for a special section, they're certainly glad to hear from you. Please give us a call and we'll give it some thought.
I like, and I think it's an advertisement, maybe Oakdale Fair and Home does it, historical pictures of Benton County.
Yes.
Those things are most interesting.
Right. That's do you remember the Benton County's past photos? And people are welcome to send us in if they have a photo or a memento or something like that they would like to see in that section. We're open to receiving that from the public as well. But I've always enjoyed those as well, being not being from here, to be able to look back and see the treasured past.
And right behind us, what brought that to my mind this morning, I've seen this 100 times, and it just really hit home today. There's a picture back here when the Bank of Camden, the old Bank of Camden, was sponsoring that section. There's a picture of Ron Lane from 1966 talking to a group of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts at the Benton County Fair with their scout leaders. So I thought, wow. So there's a lot of history to Benton County.
There certainly is, and it's really exciting to have a county this size, to have such a dedicated group, the Genealogical Society, that has a dedicated area at the Benton County Library here in Camden, where people can go and look, and if they haven't had an interest in their history here in Benton County, it's there for them when they're ready to look at it.
And I've noticed too, of course I hardly ever deal with them, but sometimes crosswords and little fun type puzzles, and so something for the youngsters, something to get them involved with the local newspapers and let them learn what it's all about.
We do have a kids page, and that content comes to us through a subscription that we have with a group that intentionally puts together great content for kids. So for kids, there's always something in there for them on the kids page, either a story of interest. There's been a series of stories this past year coming out called Tennessee History for Kids, that comes to us from the Tennessee Press Association, and those are really wonderful, interesting stories that I've enjoyed reading each week, is that they're in there about some aspect of Tennessee history, and then also some activities and games on that page for kids. And then on our what we call our faith page is our more adult-oriented leisure content, that's crossword puzzle and the Sudoku and that type of thing.
In this age of technology, social media, where we can get news immediate, it happens right now, it's up somewhere on social media within a minute after the incident happens. But in this day, with all the technology we have, internet and the computers and all, smartphones, that sort of thing, Angela, is there still a place for a weekly newspaper like the Camden Chronicle?
Well, I certainly hope so. I believe that there is. The things that we see on social media often the information that's there is incomplete. It's just the first impression or the first initial reporting about something that's happened. And what we try to do with at the newspaper with those kinds of stories is to get the rest of the story, as they say, is to talk to the first responders who were there, talk to the family that was affected, or the various citizens who were involved in a different event, to see what was the rest of the story, what preceded that, what came afterwards, what is the impact of it. So we hope that by being able to expand on such stories and provide additional information and clarify actions that took place and so forth, that we can continue to be relevant to our readers.
Well, last year, about a year ago, when the Waverly floods were still very much on everybody's mind, it still is on our mind, I understand that, but I thought the newspaper, the Tennessean, and all the big newspapers that were over there, I thought the national networks, CNN, Fox, of course, TV stations out of Nashville, I thought all those reporters, I don't care what media outlet they were with, I thought they were very sensitive to the needs. The story had to be covered, but I thought they were very sensitive. When they even talked to some of the victims, I thought, the reporters felt the pain.
Absolutely, I think they did. I think everyone, I know, we had many of our first responders who went over to Waverly that day, and our rescue squad guys and sheriff's office and Camden police and, just any variety of firefighters, all who went over to try to help. And I know that they were deeply impacted by what they witnessed and what they experienced as a part of the Waverly flood. And certainly as a media person, you have to have sensitivity to what someone's going through. I mean, we try to get the story. People want to know what's happening and want to know how they can help and how they can respond in the face of such tragedy, but you have to remain sensitive to the folks who experienced it directly and who had such terrible losses through that tragedy.
Exactly, and a lot of times you did not want to invade on the privacy of those going through such a tragedy, but at the same time, I felt as if some of those who were talking to the media, newspaper, television, whatever it might be, I felt like some of those people, it was a way of healing for them, as a matter of fact, just to release some of what was inside them.
Right, absolutely. Often when people have been through that kind of experience, they need to talk about it. They need to process what's going on, to kind of reframe their experience, if you will, into a more not acceptable, but tolerable light. And, after the fact last year, a group of us from MVP went over to Waverly to do some volunteering, and were able to, directly encounter some of the survivors and so forth at that time. And it was clear some were marshaling their resources and forging ahead, and others were really stymied in their grief, and that's all understandable and acceptable responses. But like you said, you have to be sensitive to all of that, and give folks a chance to talk if they want to. And sometimes in talking, what's being said is off the record, and that's okay. So as a reporter, that's a role that you play occasionally, is you get to be a confessor for someone when they need to talk about something, and sometimes that goes on the record, and sometimes it's off the record, and that's all right.
Sure, and I understand the MVP office over there at News Democrat may have suffered some damage, and you think within several months period of time you had that situation. Of course, the newspaper down at Dresden, because of the tornado that went through in December, then more recently over at Carroll County. So MVP's had some situations here.
We have. Fortunately, our offices, the News Democrat offices, were above the flood line, so they did not suffer any direct damage from the flooding over there. But then our Dresden office, as you said, in December, it was completely demolished. It was in the path of the tornado that went through Dresden. And in fact, one of our staff, our graphic artist over there, her family's home was damaged a great deal by the tornado. In fact, that evening when her home was damaged, her two coworkers from the Dresden Enterprise were the ones coming to help get them out of their home. And I don't know, it's been a long year with different damages to different properties, but you just do the best you can. You keep going.
We've been very lucky here in Benton County, because it just seems the bulk, the major situations, the major destruction is going away from us, and, we can count our blessings for that, but you never know, and you've always got to be prepared.
Right. Well, we did have in 2020 that was a March tornado that impacted several homes and claimed a life here in Benton County. And of course, we were grateful for those who survived and have thrived since then. In thanks to large part to our wonderful first responders and rescue squad and all who were able to get out and help the night of that tornado here in Benton County. But we just see our county so often when there is a community or a crisis that the community can help with. I see this community respond. I see Benton County and our neighboring counties around here, when there is something that happens that affects our populace, people get together and they respond in a very positive and immediate way to help those in need.
Yeah, and the front page story this week is a good example of that with the motorcycle organization down at Big Sandy, the other brothers of Big Sandy with the toy run, helping the Sheriff's Department with that, but they've helped with other community needs in recent months, and my hat's off to that group and everybody that goes out of their way to help others. We've got a lot of great volunteers in Benton County.
We really do, and we see that each year during our United Way auctions, when those auctions are going on, you see how the community responds to that. I've bought my share of $100 cakes, and not. I always think of it as I've donated $100 and got a cake for free, but there are those opportunities you can give financially, you can volunteer your time in those ways, and then for those who are trained to do so and are able to do so, like our wonderful friends down at the rescue squad and all of our volunteer fire departments who get out there and put their lives on the line, sometimes for really pennies on the dollar or no money at all, to just be a volunteer and be a good community member. So we're incredibly fortunate for this area. That's one of the reasons, the main reason really, that I've chosen to make my home here as an adult. I have no family here. I have a few friends here, but I just like this community because I find that everyone is incredibly friendly and supportive, and it's just a great place to live.
You have a passion for animals.
I do. Yes, I do. I've been an animal lover all of my life. I have pictures of myself as a toddler, holding puppies, that kind of thing. So pets have been a big part of my life for all of my life. And here in Benton County, in rural West Tennessee, I have seen a great deal of need in terms of our homeless pet populations or unwanted pets here in Benton County. And in fact, just yesterday, I was speaking with Dwayne Turner, who is the director of our Benton County Animal Shelter, and I know that right now, through Labor Day at least, they are having a reduced adoption price for pets at the shelter. The adoption price right now has been dropped down to $35 for dogs and cats because they just are so overwhelmed with the numbers of dogs and cats at the shelter right now that they've reduced that price to $35. So if you're looking for a new friend, this is a great time to go find one at the Benton County Animal Shelter with that reduced price. But there's really only one solution to our homeless and unwanted pet population, and that is for pet owners to spay and neuter your pets. That prevents any additional pets from happening. If you get out there and do that spay and neuter, and there are, if you feel like this is just something I can't afford, call the animal shelter, call your local vet and ask. There are programs to assist with the cost of spay and neuter, and it's much cheaper to get your pet spayed or neutered than it is to raise a litter of kittens, or especially a litter of puppies. And the only way that our community is going to see a real improvement in our unwanted pet population is through spay and neuter.
We are entering the final 4 months of 2022. Busy times coming up, starting next weekend with the Bargain Highway, as I mentioned at the top of the program. So what can we look forward to in these next few months with the Camden Chronicle? What are we going to see? Well,
we're definitely going to see some coverage of Bargain Highway coming up next weekend. We will see coverage of our sports teams. We'll see coverage of the inauguration of our newly elected and our re-elected politicians this next week. and we'll be seeing what happens with them on the county stage in the coming months, covering the county commission and so forth. As we mentioned earlier, when it gets a little closer to Christmas time, we'll be seeing our letters to Santa as we always do. We usually have a shop local Christmas open house event, usually the first weekend in November, when different businesses, local businesses and so forth, can participate in our Christmas open house to have a special weekend then for local shopping. And we'll just see what else happens.
Can people be of assistance to you or the Chronicle staff with a good news tip from time to time?
Oh, absolutely. We very much appreciate and rely on information from our readers, from those in the community. If there's any story you would like for us to follow or something great that's happened within your family or your community, please let us know. You can always send in a photo or a story idea to my email, which is angela@thecamdenchronicle.com. You're welcome to give us, send us a message on Facebook or give us a call directly there at the office at 731-584-7200. We're always glad to hear from the community, and anything you want to share, anything you want to see in the paper, we'll do our best to try to get it in there.
What advice would you have maybe to a young man or a young lady that would like to pursue a career in journalism? What would you tell that aspiring young person that wants to go into journalism?
Well, the first thing I would say is read a lot. If you think you were interested in becoming a writer, that starts with reading. A lot of times when you first start writing, you write in a style that you've co-opted from someone else. You may not even realize that that's true. But there's so many different styles and methods of writing out there that's something you want to become familiar with. Read the words of other people. Read what other people had to say, how they wrote it, how they said it. Follow some of our great journalists of the past. Like, have a look at the history of Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather and some of those folks and see what their careers were like. And that's what I have done, is tried to follow. I read a great deal, and that's what I would encourage any young writer to do, is to read a lot. And when you do start writing, go to someone who you consider to be a really good writer and let them critique your work, and be open-minded and accepting of tips and information to help shape your writing.
And when you start out, don't think you're starting out today and you'll be at the Washington Post or the New York Times tomorrow. Don't think that.
That's right. And the good news is, though, if you want to be a writer, you can make a living writing at a local level. You're not going to make a fortune, but you can make a living working for your local newspaper, working for a local publication, or in local radio or other media. There are opportunities out there, and you might get into it and find out, I like the technical aspect of it more than the in the front of the camera or writing down on the page. I like the technical aspects of it, so you might get interested in that part of it. There are always opportunities for those who want to seek them.
And I know it was the same way with you in Louisiana, following the LSU Tigers down there, the major newspapers covering them. Of course, I watched Tennessee Volunteers and the Tennessean, the Knoxville News Sentinel. Growing up in the 60s into the 70s, the sports writers, they just painted a picture of the setting, not just the details of the actual football game, what happened on the field, but they set the picture, they set the tone, the atmosphere, what it was like, the day, the descriptive words that they used just to give you a colorful scenario as if you were there.
That's right. Of course, we all see that, even though people think, print is dead. Well, we're all looking at stuff on our phones every day, and a lot of what we're looking at on our phones is still written information. It's not all audio and video. I look at my phone for information every day, and there are a great many, written stories that I'm looking at. So even if our printed media, such as newspaper or magazine or whatnot, even if that is dying down to some extent, there's still plenty of opportunity to write. if that's something that motivates you and that is of interest to you, and if you enjoy sharing stories, there's always going to be a way to do that.
Well, Angela, thank you so much. Thank you for giving up some of your Saturday morning for being with us today. Thank you for what you and the staff at the Camden Chronicle do for our local community. You are very much appreciated. Thank you so much, and we'll have you back real soon, and hopefully you and I can work on a remote radio broadcast on down the road as well.
That sounds great, Flash. I'd love to. Always enjoy spending time with you, whether it's on the radio or not. And I want to say thank you to you too, Flash, for your contributions to the newspaper. We couldn't do without you, and I believe the community really, really enjoys the stories that you write and that we're able to share in that medium through our printed newspaper.
Well, thank you for the wonderful tips you've given me as we've gone along into that particular aspect of journalism and print news, things like that. I appreciate you, and my best to your family, and travels when you go. I want to see a good story when you do these travels this fall.
All right. Well, I'll get something out there.
We look forward to it. Angela Jones, ladies and gentlemen, our guest this morning on Operation 7570. We appreciate Angela and all the folks at the Camden Chronicle, and look for this week's edition, which will be out around noontime this coming Wednesday at your favorite convenience store. Pick a copy up down at the Chronicle office on West Main Street or Walmart's or wherever. But thanks for being with us. We've been brought your way by your friends at Apex Bank. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you next Saturday morning.